Happy Friday, July 12th. Mark Milam here, your mortgage professional. Let's talk a little bit about what's happening in the market. Getting kind of exciting as we had a report of inflation this week. It's the most widely recognized inflation reports. The Consumer Price Index came out yesterday, and boy, the Consumer Price Index has been sticky high. It's been that way for a couple of years now. It's one of the reasons why we find ourselves in such a poor affordability market. The Fed has been wanting to see inflation moderate, and the CPI in particular has remained elevated in large part because of how it calculates shelter or rent inflation. It's heavily weighted towards owner's equivalent of rent, which is a very controversial way to measure shelter inflation, but it stays sticky high, and unfortunately, so has the Consumer Price Index until this week. We got some great news this week as the overall CPI number is now down at 3%. The month-over-month number, which is really what you want to pay attention to, actually went negative. It showed a contraction in the economy, which is the first time that has happened with the CPI in a long time. And we are now back to a level of inflation with the Consumer Price Index that we haven't seen for over 3 years, which is really saying something. Let me show you how the market responded. I'm going to flip the screen around here. These are mortgage-backed securities over the past 5 days or so towards the end here. And you can see a really strong day yesterday, breaking through a level of resistance that we had not been able to break through. You can see this red line, this layer of resistance. We've been bouncing off of that, and we finally broke through it with this excellent Consumer Price Index report. Rather flat today with just the Producer Price Index coming out, but listen, we'll take these gains. This is exactly what we need to restore affordability to the marketplace. Futures traders now for the next Fed meeting on July 31st really still not pointing to any sign of a Fed rate cut. They're still at 93% that the Fed is going to hold the Fed funds rate steady at the end of July. I'm going to tell you why they're going to do that here in a minute. But if you go out to September, the September 18th meeting, which is the next meeting after July 31st, wow, 88% chance that we could see a Fed rate cut of 1/4 of a point. That would be monumental. We have been in this range right now with the Fed in this extremely restrictive territory for well over a year, and that was coming off of the fastest rate hike cycle in modern history. So we could certainly stand to see the tide turn here and the Fed begin to cutting rates, starting a new era here at the tail end of 2024. Let's take a look at what's going on here with the inflation rate. So this is the Consumer Price Index, and you can see these are the past 12 months. These are the year-over-year readings. And really since March, we've been tailing down. Came a little lower in April, a little lower in May, a lot lower here as we move into June. Obviously in July, we were reporting the June results. But if you go back and take a look, you can see we're now at a level 3% that we haven't seen since right here, March of 2021. That's excellent. That's exactly what we need to see, is further proof that inflation is moderating and moderating smartly. So why isn't the Fed just going to go ahead and cut interest rates? Well, there's a couple of reasons behind this. And to really think about it, you have to get in the mindset of the Fed. The Fed was largely embarrassed by their transitory call of inflation when it was on the upswing. They got very much behind the curve, and that is the cardinal sin of a Federal Reserve. You do not get behind the curve on inflation because it is so hard to catch up, and inflation affects everyone. It's not like unemployment where a small segment of the marketplace or the small segment of the populace is unemployed. Inflation affects every single citizen because of how expensive everything gets right across the board, whether it's shelter, it's food, it's services, whatever it might be. So the Fed does not want to get this wrong. That's number one. That's the first reason why you're not going to see a cut in July, but you likely will see one in September. The second reason is because of something we've talked about before, which is the base effect. So this is the month-over-month inflation, and we're going to go back to July. So when we start adding up these numbers, this 0.2, this 0.5, this 0.4, we add all this up. That's what gives us our annual year-over-year inflation reading. And you can see here, we finally went negative in June, minus 0.1. You can see what's coming up though. We're going to drop off the July reading when we get to next month in August. And then we've got these 2 big months. What the Fed does not want to do is come out, cut the Fed funds rate, and then have these 2 big months as part of the reading and then see inflation potentially tick up. They want to make sure that when they cut, that inflation will actually be coming down, and they want every advantage on their side. And if they can get these 2 months as the months that will be dropping off when they start cutting in September, boy, that would be perfect, because then you've got a good 90-day window before you see anything substantive. And the Fed can point to the fact that, hey, we cut the interest rate and look at inflation, look how it's coming down. So the base effect is going to play in to the Fed's decision right along with their resistance to being embarrassed again. That's the last thing they want. Okay, if I can be of any service to you over the weekend, don't hesitate to reach out, mark.milam@highlandmtg.com.